All right, and just like that, we are back again with another episode of the Mind the Growth podcast. As always, I am Chris Kinghorn.
And I'm Eric Hoffman.
Eric, we've got a very special guest today. We've got Mr. Sir Michael Young in the house. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me. Really looking forward to this, and congrats on the podcast and the early success that you guys are having.
Thank
Awesome,
you.
awesome. We are
So,
excited as well too. I'm a car fan, but I am not the car fan of the channel. So I feel like you and Eric are. It's probably I might be pushed to the side for most of this. So I wanted to get us started and we'll get kicked off. But Michael, for those of the viewers who are not as familiar with you, can you kind of just maybe give us a 3 to 5 minute history of who you are? You've got a very impressive story at fairly young age. So I want to kind of give them some context of who you are.
Well, I appreciate that, Chris. Don't know how impressive, but nonetheless, I really appreciate you guys having me on. And yeah, as you guys mentioned, I'm Michael Young. I'm born and raised here in Phoenix area, and just been really an entrepreneur from an early age. I got my start in the nonprofit sector. Back in middle school, I founded a nonprofit that raised money for the animal assisted therapy program at Phoenix Children's Hospital. That was kind of my foray into entrepreneurship, running a nonprofit, a foundation, and really segued that post college into the for-profit sector, and was involved in a couple tech startups that were venture-backed companies. Yeah, had a little bit of success, not as much as I would have hoped, but nonetheless really got my feet wet in that, and was able to understand the ups and downs of starting a company from really the inception of just concept, bringing a product to market, scaling it, and exiting and moving on to other ventures. And lo and behold, with the pandemic and some things that were going on in my previous company, I had some extra time on my hands and was able to turn my passion for cars in the collector car industry, something I'd been around at least in a peripheral sense, into a business, and have been on a more full-time basis focused on buying, selling really rare collectible manual transmission cars, and am in the process of finalizing a physical location for our dealership here in Scottsdale that should be up and running here in the coming months, and just excited for the future growth, especially within an industry that I'm so passionate about. It's special to be able to do something that you really enjoy, love each and every day.
fascinating. So, cars. Give us a history of cars. Were you always an enthusiast? Did you always have your eyes on cars as a kid? Where did the manual transmission love come into play? Give us that history.
Absolutely. So some of my most fond early memories are really going for Saturday drives with my dad in whatever sports car he had at the time. Started out with De Tomaso Panteras. So back in the day, he had a 1972 yellow, all original, really kind of a time capsule De Tomaso Pantera. That was the fifth Pantera that he had. He was just avid about the brand. It was an early 1970s Italian built car with a Ford 351 Cleveland motor in it, 5-speed ZF transmission manual, and just a really kind of cool, don't want to say total bargain, but it was a relative bargain compared to the Lamborghinis, Ferraris of the day. Really fun drivers' cars. And so me at 1, 2, 3 years old, we would go for our weekly Saturday drives, listen to Led Zeppelin, and I was just hooked on this car and the experience of riding around in something that made all kinds of noise. Yeah, listening to music with my dad, it was really special to me. And in 97, we sold that car at Barrett Jackson. And I truly, I'm 4 years old at this point, didn't have an understanding of the fact that cars going away, not going to have it anymore. I was just excited for the car to go on stage. I remember this was the days where you actually drove up on stage with your car, rather than they now have people who are driving all the vehicles up on stage, and you're more removed from the experience, I would say. But at this point, we drive up on stage, I'm all excited. I've been helping detail the car, and at the end, when it did sell, it met reserve. They offered reserves back in those times. Drive off the stage, and I just remember being in tears, just devastated, now understanding that that car was actually going away. but it went to, I don't know if you guys know Yankee Candle Company, but the founder of that company was a huge car collector and had a museum. He was on site. He was the one that actually purchased the car for the museum. And that car ended up going back to Massachusetts. He invited us out there because he saw me at a little, young age detailing this car prior to auction. And about a year later, we went to the museum. He gave us the tour, opened the car up, and it was just a really special experience. And that further kind of introduced me to the collector car community and just how open and generous people were, that this guy who bought this car from us, would invite us to see his collection, see the museum, and take us around. So that got me hooked. And my dad had a few other cars over the years, most of which were manual transmission cars. So I just remembered shifting gears from the passenger seat for him. Obviously, he'd operate the clutch, but he would let me shift, and it got me so hooked on it. And as I grew up, I started racing go-karts a little bit, never that good at it, but got the experience of driving cars and did some track days. Fastest driver out there, and that's okay. But with a manual transmission, you just have such a raw, visceral experience that really connects you to a car. And a drive, whether it's going to the grocery store or going for a lap around Laguna Seca, it doesn't matter because it's a real event, and it gives a sense of, I'm race car driver. Doesn't matter if you are or not. It's something that you just can't replicate with paddle shifted cars. They all at low speeds, feel very similar to driving, your Prius on the road. I don't want to go to that extreme, but there's some element of truth to it. It's not the same experience where, if I get on, a manual transmission just coming up, down the street and coming up to a stoplight, I can still get on it and heel toe down the gears and really feel an element of connection to the car. And the collector car community has really gravitated towards manual transmission cars because most manufacturers, really outside of Porsche, they've stopped producing manual transmission cars. Yes, BMW can still get them, but Ferrari, Lamborghini, Mercedes, Audi, anything really cool and enjoyable for the most part, they're just focused on lap time numbers around the Nürburgring. And that element of joy for the average collector is just not the same when you compare paddle shifted cars to manual transmission. Yes, racing environment, your dual clutch or single clutch paddle shifted car, depending on what product has been put in there, it is faster, but it's not more enjoyable, at least in my opinion.
And that's why Porsche will always be the best car manufacturer in the world, as far as I'm concerned. But that's a side note. So to level set a little bit for you, Michael, I'll give you some brief history of myself, and we have similar backgrounds in regards to cars and our love for them. So when I was 2, 3, 4 years old, my dad had a 300ZX twin turbo Nissan, and he loved that. That was like his baby. And I would shift for him. It was a manual transmission, 5-speed, and I loved it. And so growing up, I would gravitate towards those racing games at arcades that had the gearbox, if you remember the gated shifters. And anytime we'd go to a car show, especially in Phoenix, which forever around Thanksgiving time every year, there was the Phoenix Auto Show at the Civic Center, which I went to every year.
Me too.
And I would search out the entire auto show just for the manual transmission cars and just sit in there for probably way too long and just shift the hell out of the gearbox and probably ruin it. But I was obsessed pretty early on. And then my older brother, he's 2 years older than me. So he got his license and his permit, again, 2 years before I could drive. And he wound up buying a beat up Toyota 4Runner that was, I think it was a 4-speed manual. And I convinced him when I was 13 and a half, 14 years old to let me drive it. And it was the first time I drove an actual manual car. Didn't stall once, which I was very proud of. And that was my foray into it. So I've always had a love for it. And I also have a controversial maybe view of manual transmissions. I have a strong belief that everybody who is in the 16-year-old age group should be required to learn to drive a manual car, because the roads would be much safer
Hmm.
if people actually understood how to drive a manual car and got used to driving under those circumstances. Because when you're driving a manual car, you can't text, you
Hmm.
can't take a phone call, you're just one with the car, and that's that. So that's my personal view, and I will always lobby for manufacturers to keep a manual transmission around. But that was kind of my foray into it. And so I wanted to give the audience. I don't think I've told that story on this podcast before, and we can get into some of my cars too because I want to hear about yours. But yeah, interesting that we had some similar backgrounds in a similar area.
Absolutely. We were kindred spirits to say the least. By the way, I like those 300ZXs. Those are cool cars with the 5 speed and
They're
the twin turbos.
totally.
There's been some that have been bringing pretty strong numbers. I'm not a JDM expert by any stretch, but those are cool cars.
It was the little brother of the Supra at the
Hmm.
time. Everyone wanted the Supra. The JLZ motor
Hmm.
was pretty popular, but the 300ZX I happen to like and love. So yeah.
So, Michael, before we go down the list of cars, because I know Eric's going to want to talk about his GT4, and we'll probably have to talk about the Nissan GTR and a few others. I know that one's not manual, but
Hey, we'll give you a
we'll
pass
get
there.
there.
Appreciate
Exactly. Can you so before we, because I would love to do kind of a deep dive and really nerd out about specific cars, but before we do that, can we touch on electric cars and what your thoughts are on electric cars?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. And I'll start this by saying I'm truly not an expert in terms of electrified vehicles. Do I think that there's absolutely a place in the market, and are they the future? 1000%. Think we'll see, yeah, every single manufacturer producing predominantly electric cars, just yeah, for a variety of reasons, from the environmental factors to the ownership cost in terms of charging. I do think that there's still some things that need to be sorted out. And again, not an expert here, but in terms of the manufacturing process, yes, when you get the car into the end user, it is better for the environment, but there are a lot of processes in terms of battery pack manufacturing and still the overall manufacturing of the cars that I think we still need to get greener in order to accomplish the overall goal of really reducing, carbon emissions, et cetera. Looking at the whole life cycle of the car from birth to death, essentially, when the car is in a scrap yard, that's important. So I think we're still getting there, but the advancement has been just mind-boggling. And yeah, whether it's looking at Rimac, the Croatian car company that yeah has taken the high-end super car scene by storm, to what's being done on the entry level, whether it's Kia or whomever getting into the space with fully electric vehicles. It's cool to see. Now, I'm biased and probably too much of a polluter in the fact that I'm not yet one to give up my gas powered car even as a daily, but I'm sure at some point I will be driving an electric car, and it is the future. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes, and I just wish they could put a manual transmission in an electric car and pump some fake motor noises in there.
I don't think you'll have to worry about that. I personally don't think gas powered cars are going away anytime soon. Maybe my head's in the sand a little bit on that, but yeah, I mean, I agree. Electric cars, there's clearly a place for them, but at the same time, lithium ion
Mhm.
batteries are difficult to manufacture. They can also, to a degree, be considered pollutants at some point. They take forever to break down, and the raw materials are going to become really hard to come by when you produce millions of cars every year. So we'll see what happens there. And frankly, I don't know if you've been in or driven or owned a
Mhm.
Tesla. I think they're garbage cars. Sorry, Elon, I like you, but the actual feel of a Tesla, my mom had an X100D, so it was fast as hell, yeah, but it was fast in a way that like makes you
Mhm.
sick, like in a manufactured fast. That's the best way I can describe it. And just the materials, the way it was put together, the panel gaps, which us us petrol heads like to talk about. It's not a great car for what they charge. That being said, I'd love to own a Rimac maybe one day. They seem pretty cool. But yeah, I'll always probably hold on with a death grip to my Porsches of the world.
I'm
So
with you. I second those sentiments entirely. Yeah, I mean, for 100 to $150,000, the fit and finish, and again, sorry, Elon, but it leaves a lot to be desired. And it's just a roller coaster fast. It is almost artificial. I agree with that.
yeah, yeah. So getting into so it's called Young Motor Cars. Is that
Yes, it
correct?
is.
Gotcha. So I've been to your page. I've seen some beautiful Porsches, especially the GTs. Give us a rundown, and I have one thing after you give us a rundown that I'll comment on, especially on your Instagram, and you may know. But I love Porsche GTs. In fact, I was talking to my younger brother today because I think you've sold cars on Bring a Trailer, which is one of my favorite sites to peruse every day. There is a
Hmm.
918 listed for sale
Yep,
today
that
that I
Weissach. Yeah,
believe went over 2 million. Yep. And I was talking to my younger brother because we're both obsessed, and we were trying to decide whether we would choose a mint Carrera GT over a mint 918. And I was having a really difficult time deciding. I think I would still go with the GT. It's just an icon, manual. That V10 is just, there's nothing like it. But the 918 is also a gorgeous car. So let's start there. 918 or Carrera GT, and tell us about the cars in your stable right now.
absolutely. So, in terms of 918 Carrera GT, I don't have a whole lot of seat time in a 918, so I'll throw that out there. It's not a car that I've focused on personally or professionally. So the answer's easy. It's a Carrera GT all day and twice on Sunday. I hate to put it this way, but I'm 29 right now, and yeah, having owned Carrera GTs and gotten some extensive button seat time and sold them, I can safely say that there might not be a better car that I drive in my entire lifetime, which on one hand is kind of sad, reaching, the ultimate peak at,
The peak.
before you're 30 in terms of what you may consider to be the greatest driver's car of all time. But on the other hand, yeah, it just makes you all the more appreciative of being able to have, yeah, experienced a car like that. The Carrera GT, yes, they made about 300 more, a little bit more than that, than the 918. So the 918 technically is a rarer car, but we get into paddle shifters, and it's got a V8 that sounds good on the 918, with the electric assist from the electric motors as well. And yeah, I have no qualms. Yeah, 918 is a great car, great lines. I'll probably be a little controversial here and say out of the Holy Trinity, 918 P1 and LaFerrari, I actually prefer the 918. Having some experience with all three cars, I just like the lines of it. I think it's going to age the best. Um, but with that being said, the Carrera GT is so raw, so visceral, maybe one of the greatest sounding cars of all time. I'd throw the F50 up there, LFA, the CGT, Carrera GT. I'd kind of put all those up there in terms of production cars. If we go to really, really modern now, the T50 from Gordon Murray, that Cosworth,
Just gonna ask
the
you.
the Cosworth V12 that's in there, that's just revving to the moon. The Apollo IE, and then I'd throw the new Valkyrie and Valkyrie Spider up there as just kind of the best sounding production cars of all time. But that Carrera GT, it is just so unbelievable. The center shift position mounted up high, right next to the steering wheel, is I think ingenious. You're just so close moving from the shifter with the balsa wood, which I prefer over the carbon option. That's just my take in terms of my preference.
I love it. Chris, you had something?
I do. I do. I'm a big 918 guy, so I feel like there's two votes for the GT and one for the 918. So call it almost a draw. Michael, so you had mentioned okay, showroom is coming soon. What are kind of some of the goals with the business as a whole? Is it going to be more so of kind of a select clientele basis? Do you have an idea on what you want the showroom to look like? Is it private showings? What's the business model
Yeah,
looking like for
absolutely.
this?
So I think for young motor cars, really our focus is quality over quantity. I started to buy some cars just from a personal standpoint, and that's what gave me a little bit of an experience in terms of the do's and don'ts of the business, prior to pursuing this on some professional level. And what I saw is that even when you're going to some of these top tier, very niche dealerships, there's still some of the used car tactics that are played, whether you're talking about cars that are $100,000 or cars that are $1 million plus. And that was a big turnoff and something that really bothered me in terms of my own personal experiences. Having to fight with dealers for simple things and dealing with misrepresentation of cars. That's where I said, okay, there's still a big opportunity to do this right, focus on the quality of the cars, really only represent cars that you would buy yourself for your own personal collection, and bring awesome cars to market and gain the trust of both people that are selling you the cars and people that are buying you the cars or consigning with you. So it is going to be appointment only. We're operating on a very exclusive model. We're not focused on the quantity that we're doing, but really the quality of the cars that we bring to market. Showroom's going to be mostly, space for cars. We're not focused on a whole lot other than the cars. It'll be, very nice and inviting, and a place that you're comfortable buying a $100,000 to multi-million-dollar car, but it's about the cars at the end of the day and about the relationships with the customers. So that's where our focus lies. We're not trying to get into things that we don't understand. And our bread and butter is going to be the Porsches and Ferraris and the manual transmission cars that are modern classics. I want to make sure that when I represent a car, something that I understand, I can safely say, hey, you're getting a great automobile. Here is what it is, and there are no surprises or hidden stories.
So with that model, I like I was saying earlier, I'm on
Hmm.
Bring a Trailer probably most days, and I'm watching what cars are going for. There's in business there what I find difficult with this market, because I've considered doing something similar to what you're proposing. And by the way, before I even get into it, are you familiar with a company called DDW
Yeah,
Partners
they're up
in
in North
Scottsdale?
Scottsdale. I don't know the guys, but they
Yeah,
do an annual car show as well for charity and for a great cause, and
yeah.
been to that. And no, they do some really good cars, and more of the niche market as well.
Yeah, so they're definitely doing
Hmm.
something similar to what you described, and I've had one or two brief conversations with the owner. But the reason I ask is because what I've always been curious about, it's very hard to predict what people will pay for
Hmm.
high-end cars, especially these classic cars like Carrera GTs. So uh, how do you project out what you should be buying these for versus what you could potentially sell them for? Because we're talking, millions of dollars to even just acquire one of these. So, how have you been thinking through that process with a market that can be unpredictable?
Yes.
Well, then also consignment is a component of that as
No,
well
Yeah,
no,
too. Sorry to
no.
cut you
Great,
sure.
off. I just
great
wanted to
Yeah,
throw that
questions
out
from
there.
both of you. So I'll start with predicting the market. Yeah. So in terms of trying to predict what cars are going to continue to appreciate, what markets are going to be strong, that's obviously a challenge, especially during uncertain economic times. I think you have to take a multifaceted approach. One, in bad times, just focus on really buying the best examples that you can. The people that are going to continue to shell out money for the best examples are going to be those that are less affected and still very comfortable financially. They're still going to want to buy. There's still going to be bidding wars for the best examples. Whereas for the cars that I'd say attract more the, to put it mildly, the Bitcoin millionaire, the Lamborghini Huracans, Lamborghini STOs of the world, which are, don't get me wrong, cool cars, but they are normally depreciating assets and more recently have been appreciating assets. Those are the things that I would really stay away from, along with higher mileage examples of cars that are more driver quality. I think that we'll see some regression back to lower price points, maybe not the price points that we were seeing just prior to the pandemic, but I do think we'll see some regression. So I place an emphasis on buying things that are really high quality examples. That's the first thing. And then also projecting out, I kind of have a 25-year rule that I look towards. So typically 25 years out from when a car was initially released, you see a pop in terms of their value due to the fact that the kids that put those cars on posters or played with them in video games now, as we get to that era, tend to have the money to start to buy those cars. So I'm looking at things that are about 25 years old. 550 Maranellos, that Ferrari that really hit the States in about 97. That is a perfect example of a car that's really taken off recently. One, due to the increase in price overall, but also due to the fact that the kids that thought that's a cool car, they can now afford those. So we've seen those cars really come into the market strong over the last couple years. And I do think that part of it is due to the fact that you have the children of yesteryear that can now afford those cars and go, hey, I want to be able to own my dream car from my childhood. So those are two primary factors that I look towards in terms of purchasing cars. And the old adage of tough times are opportunities to make fortunes if you can really play your cards right, buy great collector cars from stable brands, Ferrari, Porsche, etc. I think those cars will do better and continue to appreciate, or at the very least hold in a steadier market than some of the others that we're going to see a drop off just due to these astronomically high values that we've seen over the past year.
So, speaking of selling cars, I was perusing your Instagram page and I couldn't help but notice a blue Lamborghini Urus, the gorgeous SUV, which is not a manual transmission. So, what happened there? Is that
Yeah,
an exception to stray away from?
it was an exception, and that brings a great segue to Chris's earlier question as well around consignments. That car belonged to a good friend and client of mine, and I was just doing him a favor as he was getting ready to take another car in. I was just trying to assist him on selling that. But no, that is not a car that is bread and butter for me. But if
Sure.
you're a good friend or a good client, then happy to help out if need be. But yes, he did a great job with that car, and when he purchased it, it was a beautiful blue Cepheus Urus, and he has great taste in cars, and I'm privileged to call him a good friend as well.
Gotcha. One question that I had for you, given where we're at today with manufacturers and people's desires, what's your take on the Singers and the Gunther Works of the world that are doing these resto mods, and where those fit into not only the popular culture but the market as a whole? Give us your take on some of those things.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of both what Singer and Gunther Works are doing. Obviously, Singer's a little bit more established, become a household name, I think, within some of the more upper echelon tiers of collectors. Not to say that Gunther Works clients aren't in that same level. I just think that the Singers have made their way into some of the best collections in the world, and Gunther Works is definitely on that track. Very different design takes in terms of the resto mod Porsche world between Singer and Gunther Works. I'm kicking myself for not buying a couple Singers about a year ago. I just wasn't as familiar with the market in terms of what they were transacting for behind closed doors. And then some have made their way to public market and brought very strong numbers. Big fan of, I believe it was the Greenwich Commission that Singer did and sold on P Car Market. Shout out to those guys who do a tremendous job and got a very nice result on that commission. But I'm a big fan. I would love to have some in terms of inventory, or one day when I can afford it personally in my collection, like what they did with the new Singer that they released in terms of the turbo platform, going away from the naturally aspirated 4
Yep.
liters that they've been doing. And Gunther Works, I mean, off the 993, which is one of my favorite eras of Porsche. Just think the lines are phenomenal,
my
and that is just
my
a
all-time favorite.
resto mod track weapon. Yeah, I absolutely love it. I've seen a number of their commissions in person, and I'm just blown away by what they're doing. So, uh, yeah,
It's wild.
huge fan.
Yeah, nice. And so there's a new group in town called Auto Car Club, and they have a few different aspects of their business. Are you familiar? Are you a member? Have you been to the facility? Tell us about Auto.
Yes, so I'm not currently a member, but probably will join some point in time. It's a great group of people that belong there. Eli has done a phenomenal job building out that facility, from the way that they've organized storage for the cars to the artwork to just the overall layout. He, yeah, did a phenomenal job renovating that building and bringing auto to light. So my hat goes off to what they've done with their operation.
Yeah, it's a really cool shop. I love it. Chris?
Yeah, so I did, Michael. I've got a quick question before we pivot into kind of a little bit of a different topic. I feel like we have to ask this question because it's so fitting. What would be, and I'm have to imagine the answer would probably change over time, but when you look at right now what your Grail car would be, and then do you anticipate that kind of shifting or moving over time?
That is a great question, Chris. For the longest time, it was a Ferrari 250 GTO, but that's been surpassed now with the recent sale of a Mercedes old 300 SLR that was sold, one of the ones that they had on their personal museum collection. The 250 GTO is historically the most expensive car in the world. And I don't want to say that that is why I loved it, but I think there was an element when I was a child, I was so taken aback by the prices that those fetched. And I love the lines of the car. I think it's a beautiful car. But I don't know that that would now be my absolute grail car, just from the standpoint of having gotten the opportunity to be behind the wheel of some of these grail type cars. I realize that there's something to be said for a car that you can really drive that's a little bit more modern and has some of the performance. Not to say, I mean, the 250 GTO, not having driven one, but from talking to people who do own or have extensive seat time behind them, yeah, great driving car. It really is fast, and especially for that era of early 1960s. But I think for me, in terms of what I would most enjoy driving, that's going to be a little bit different. I would love to get my hands on a Carrera GT that has some miles that I can feel guilt free about racking up the miles and taking on some rallies and some, you know, just drives and not feel terrible. So something in like 15 to 20,000 mile range, because those cars are really robust, would be perfect. And I think that would be probably my holy grail driver. Something that I'm going to stare at as an art piece, that's a little bit harder. Still might be a 250 GTO, might be a 250 SWB, or a 275 GTB C. I love the lines of all those cars. The other kind of the modern grail car that I do gravitate towards that's about to go into production is the De Tomaso P72. That is a grail car, and there will be one coming to Scottsdale. I won't give too much away, but one of those will be coming here probably late 2023. So I'll keep you guys posted on that. But that is an absolute, in terms of modern design with a throwback to 1960s Le Mans style race cars, that is an absolute grail of mine as well.
Yeah, very, very interesting design, and it's definitely going to be. It has, I think, a little bit of a feel of a Pagani in a sense, especially the
Mm-hmm.
interior, the way they designed it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's going to be an incredible car. I would say, for myself at least, I've always had an obsession with the original McLaren F1. I think it's one of the most
Great
unique
choice.
and special cars ever created. And just that center seat drive, manual transmission, incredibly fast, lightning fast for its time, the fastest car in the
Mm-hmm.
world when it was created. It's just, I think that'll definitely go down as maybe the top two or three cars ever created. So I would love to get my hands on one of those. It'll probably be impossible, but I'll still attempt it at some point. But
I
yeah,
I'm with
that's
you. I
go ahead.
totally agree. only, and I'm with you, that I would say is my ultimate modern classic Grail car. The only reason I didn't throw it on there is just talking to some people that own them. And granted, I'm with you. I would love for two of those to come, one for you, one for me, one day
Yeah.
to the valley.
Yeah.
But the way that I can put it is the driving experience from what I've heard, and especially even like on track. I know a guy, I was out at an event last year and he had his Carrera GT and he had his F1 with the HDK high downforce kit on the track at Laguna Seca. And I was just talking to him in terms of the dynamics. And he goes, yeah, the McLaren F1's cool, but the Carrera GT, just from a driving standpoint, is a lot better, more enjoyable car to drive. And that
Yeah.
honestly was like meeting your hero and being slightly disappointed. Now, granted, I've never driven an F1, so this is just conjecture from someone who has a lot of miles under
Sure.
his belt in both cars. I was a little saddened to hear that, but don't get me wrong, I would kill, especially for an LM spec McLaren F1. I'm right there with you, Eric. That is a great choice.
Yep. Just got to make a little more money, then we'll
Yeah,
then I'll have it.
I'm with you.
So my Lamborghini pick for the Urus is doesn't look very good after that. But so Michael, when we're looking at your clientele and a lot of the things that we talk about on this channel have to do around business and our hobbies and what we enjoy, and two of those happen to be two things that I'm assuming would kind of tie into very much so what your clientele would enjoy as well too, and those are watches and wine. And so would you consider yourself a wine guy or a watch guy?
I'm a both guy. I know enough to be dangerous about both, but definitely not expert in terms of the knowledge that some of these gentlemen and ladies that I'm surrounded with definitely have. But yeah, huge fan of watches and big fan of wine as well.
So let's go to a similar question. What's your watch preference in terms of brand or spec in terms of the type of watch within a brand, or what's your grail right now if you don't have it?
Oh, what is a Grail watch for me? So I hope Rolex isn't listening to this because I like Rolex as a brand, and ironically, I'm wearing a Panda Dial Daytona right now. Uh, but outside of the Daytona line of watches, I'm not the biggest Rolex guy. I really like Daytonas. I'm wearing the ceramic bezel Panda Dial right now, but I like actually a lot of the um, vintage Daytonas. So going back to like the Zenith Daytona, that that was their movement they put in prior to going in house and in early 2000s with their own movement. But I like the Zenith Daytona a lot. And then going back to really a Grail would be like a Paul Newman Daytona. I mean, that's just such a cool watch. I like some of the pre Daytonas as well in terms of Rolex chronographs. Um, in terms of Grail watches, I mean, I have a respect for a lot of different haute horology watchmakers, so to speak. I mean, like I respect Richard Mille. It's a little bit flashy for my taste. I'm more of an under the radar kind of guy. So I would say, yeah, I'm really into Audemars right now. I'm trying to establish a relationship with the Audemars boutique because that is a brand that I love and would love to buy more of. I'm working towards relationships hopefully with Vacheron. I love the Overseas and a lot of the other watches that Vacheron produces. I like classic designs. I like things that are timeless. So for me, it's all about again something that is maybe more of a watch guy's watch rather than something that everyone knows and is you're wearing to be seen. I'm more of stainless steel over precious metals. Uh, Again, Grail watches. I think I still have to go with Patek. I love, I mean, there's so many Patek Philippe's that I absolutely love in terms of a daily wear watch. Um, I love some of the Aquanauts and Nautiluses. I mean, sure, anyone could say, yeah, I'd love a Tiffany Nautilus right now, but I'm not going to even have delusions of grandeur in terms of something like that. I'd be really happy with, yeah, pretty much any Nautilus or um, Aquanaut right now. So I'd say something in that family be my Grail at the moment. But I'm not at that level yet. Maybe one day. What about you guys? What do you have your eyes on, or what are in your collections and are absolute Grails for you?
Eric, go for it.
Well, you were touching on one, I think, Chris. I'm a
The
big. Go ahead.
so yeah, I guess in mine at least. Eric and I both have. I've got a sub. I'm working to get a to get the green face Kermit right now, but I
Ooh,
think Girl
I
is
love
probably a
that.
6241 or the 6263. The Newman
Mm,
the Paul
mm.
Newman Daytona is it's probably mine as well too. That's I don't think you can beat that. It's one of the just most perfect examples of a watch in my opinion. So that's but that Panda dial that you've got on, that's hopefully next on my list eventually. Maybe in the next year or two. That's something I'm working for.
I like it. I mean, the
Yeah,
watch market's
I
coming
think
down, so could be a good time.
you're. That's right. I I happen to really like the look of the green Aquanaut, which weirdly they call
Mm,
khaki. Um, I mean, it's become a classic already because they discontinued it, but I just think the look of it is really cool. Not so much the orange dial and the orange band, although that's become very popular as well. But yeah, I'm with you. With I'd die for a Tiffany stamped Nautilus, no problem. But yeah, some of their dress watches I would love. Even some vintage Pateks are great. I really like Vacheron came out. I think it was last year with they did a collaboration with this adventurer Corey something
mhm.
for an overseas uh, Everest model, and I thought those looked fantastic. And they're on like a, a nice. They give you a few different options in terms of straps, but I like that one a lot. And I've been looking at Vacherons more recently, and I'm coming to love the brand and what they've been doing. So I mean, there's too many to list. It's just lots. And what one question that I'm actually curious from your perspective on, what's your take, and do you like slash appreciate the Tubions of the world? Is it just a gimmick, or are you all for seeing that on a watch face?
So when I first got into watches, I was probably about 13 or 14. Had a family friend who has about 300 watches in his collection, and we're not talking like all, you know, 20, $30,000 watches. He has everything from, really cool Rolex to Breguet to you name it. But he also has just some awesome watches that are $1,000 or sub $1,000. Even cool pocket watch conversions. So in terms of my exposure, I was really interested talking to him because he knew a lot about the watchmaking process, and I discovered tourbillon movements, and I was blown away. And I remember, yeah, like 18 years old, walking into some boutiques and going, "Oh my gosh, is that the this and this tourbillon?" And the people being like, okay, this kid's a little weird walking in and knowing about the exact watches that are being displayed for a few hundred thousand, and they were really inviting and welcoming to me and showed me the watches, let me put it on wrist, and these were $200,000-300,000 timepieces. So I do have an appreciation for tourbillon movements. And granted, when it was designed, they thought it would be a better um, keeper of time and keep more accurate time because of gravity's effect on the watch movement. And we've come to see that, with modern watchmaking techniques, it really isn't a whole lot more accurate. But with that being said, I do appreciate the tourbillon, movement in that complication. I do think they look cool. I still have a soft spot for them. Would I be shelling out, some of the money required to get a tourbillon? No, but if the right opportunity presented itself within the marketplace and I could steal one that I think is a pretty good store of value. One day, if I've got the cash on hand, I could play ball. What about you, Eric? Are you a fan, or are you not on that train?
I mean, if money were no object, I would be, but I don't know that I can justify the premium that they bring in terms of a similar model without it. So yeah, I mean, I think it's cool, and I like the look of it, and a lot of the new APs that came out for the 50th anniversary, the Royal Oak line. There was a couple that featured a Tourbillon, which would be awesome to have. But I'd be probably just as happy with the skeletonized AP, just
Hmm.
as I would with a Tourbillon for maybe 1/10 the price. So that's my general take.
It's
If
the
we're
dual balanced wheel, Eric.
exactly, yeah, yeah. So normally Chris asks this, but I'll ask it today. We named the show "Mind the Growth" for lots of different reasons, which we don't need to get into. But what we ask every guest at the end of each episode is, "What does the word growth mean to you?" First thing that comes to mind.
I think growth is something that we are doing every day from the moment we're born until the day that we die. I think growth means improvement, and in life, whether it's just being a better human being in terms of putting good out in the world, or a better businessman or woman, or a better son, better boyfriend, better husband, you name it. It's really just about waking up each and every day and saying, how can I get incrementally better? Looking yourself in the mirror and realizing that we're all imperfect human beings. And how do I take a step forward and just be a better person in whatever it is that I'm pursuing? So for me, growth is just the epitome of life, I think, at the end of the day. We grow more and more each and every day until the day that we're no longer on this earth, in my opinion. So I love the name of the podcast, and I think that the focus is really not to sound too cliche, but almost the epitome of life.
I like
I
it.
couldn't have said it better myself.
Makes us feel a lot better about the name of the podcast too.
Yeah.
So appreciate that, Michael.
No, absolutely, guys. I really like what you're doing, and like the direction that you guys have chosen.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it. Best of luck with everything cars related, everything life related, and we'll keep growing. And we hope to check in on you soon.
That sounds great, guys. Hey, continued success for you both in terms of the podcast and outside, and looking forward to catching up with both of you and hearing more about what's going on in your day to day as well.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for joining us, Michael.
Bye.
Absolutely, guys.